Well, you and I have touched on the tragedy that was played out at the school, the prep school you attended, Caldicott School, in which you were not involved, but some pupils were, and they fell prey to the activities of paedophiles, one of whom was sentenced to some 8 years, the former headmaster, Peter Wright.
Yeah, horrific.
One of your contemporaries at the school, Ian McFadden, has been speaking to LBC. He's told us a horrific story of what he endured.
I do remember him coming into the bathroom, and he took the soap and he soaped up his hands and he cleaned under my armpits, and he asked me to stand up, and then it started explaining about hygiene and started cleaning underneath. And this is how the abuse started with him. And that progressed over a number of years. He enjoyed hurting me. He really took pleasure from it. I could feel it.
I've got a photo of you in your school days, and I'm not quite sure how old you are. Can you just confirm that boy there is you?
Yes, that's me. Mm-hmm.
How old are you there?
I must have been, I'm not entirely sure, but 9 or 10.
And there's a chap to your left.
Yes, he's known now as the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Nick Clegg, who was in my class, and we played rugby together, and we were friends. Yeah.
I know you haven't seen Nick Clegg since you left school, but what would you say to him if he were here now?
I'm passing the ball to you. You know, I've done my bit. I stood up 5 years ago and I opened my life up to the world. I had my private life, my family sexual life, my physical health and mental health discussed, and around a jury and a courtroom full of people, of lawyers. You know, I've done my bit, you know. I've got I have somebody who abused me who's no longer here, who's dead. I have another person in prison. I've done as much as I can do. So I pass the baton to you, Nick. It's down to you as to what you can do to stop kids being hurt, you know. And I'm glad that you weren't touched, and I'm glad you weren't hurt, and I'm glad that you weren't aware of it, because do you know what? None of it's done any of the boys who are now men any good. You know, there's a lot of damaged people out there. Please try and stop kids from getting hurt.
It's important to stress, Mr. McFadden said Nick Clegg did not know what was going on. He was not affected, and he actually paid tribute to what a good bloke Nick Clegg was as a lad, who helped Mr. McFadden both on the classroom and on the rugby field. Apparently you were a very good friend to him. Mr. Clegg.
Well, it's incredibly distressing to hear that. I think it's distressing to anyone who's listening to this. I find it, of course, particularly distressing. I mean, it may have been, over 35 years ago when I was a small kid at this school, and it's very, it's very harrowing. I had basically happy recollections at school. I was a happy school kid. Nothing happened to me or my brother. And then just to feel now, with hindsight, over 3 decades later, that people like Ian McFadden were being put through this nightmare, and you're just completely, oblivious. It's just...
what can a government do, Mr. Clegg?
Oh, I think a government can do a fair number of things. As you know, the law has changed a lot since then. The kind of vigilance of local authorities, social services, the police, politicians, all, I think, are quite different to what it was, 30, 40 years ago. There is a debate which we're looking at, which is whether we can further strengthen the protections through basically passing into law a sort of mandatory requirement that if you suspect something's going on, you report it. And we're looking at it. Frankly, the evidence is rather ambivalent. Some other countries have tried it and it hasn't really helped. There's a little bit of evidence in other countries it might even stop people passing on information, but I mean, that's just a practical issue which we need to look at and do whatever, if the evidence shows that would help, we must do it. But I have to say to Ian McFadden that as you just heard in that very moving clip, his courage, which has clearly left him very distressed, and I hope he knows this, will have done a great deal to protect children now and in the future, because his courage and that of other people, victims who speak out like that, of course, not only bring perpetrators to justice, which has finally happened in the case of Peter Wright, the headmaster, and others, but it also brings it out into the open in a way where it has previously lurked in the kind of shadows, and that in a strange kind of way is probably the greatest inoculation that we can have as a society against this kind of thing happening out of sight and out of mind.